Welcome to the lecture on strategic and operational planning. Our agenda is to distinguish between strategic and operational planning, discuss the importance of planning and goal setting, and learn the steps in the strategic planning process. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because this is one of the things that I do as a consultant. I help companies, healthcare organizations, physicians, and universities with strategic planning. So I'll be sharing some of those experiences with you as we go through this lecture. Strategy is an organization's plan to use its core competencies, what it's great at, to achieve competitive advantage as is consistent with its mission and goals. So again, how can it create value within the market? Which of the following statements is true regarding an effective strategy? Is it A, it focuses on the internal operations of the company? Is it B, it represents the annual employee goals? Or is it C, it focuses on long-term goals that enable the organization to be successful in the external environment? You probably guessed correctly that it is C. Strategic planning or a strategic plan is an external focus on the environment. And it's answering the question, how do we stay competitive? So their plan is long-term, it's more general, so it's at this organizational level, and it's providing direction. It can be done at a corporate level, so you're asking, well, what industry and or businesses are we in or should we be in? It can be done at a business level. So how should particular business units compete? Sometimes I've even done it at a department level. You also then, as part of organizational planning and organizational design, you need operational planning. So operational planning takes that strategic plan and focuses internally on the company. So how do we put that strategic plan into action? It too can be done at an organizational level, looking at corporate and business plans, but again, looking internally at the operations. It could be done at a department level, so this would be more functional level planning or divisional level planning. And then it should trickle all the way down to each individual employee. The planning process then are the efforts that are used to guide what an organization does, why, and for whom. So you go through this process then to help develop your strategic and operational plans. Here is a framework that I typically use or something similar to this. So in any organization, you have enduring components, the mission, the vision, the values. And you also then have the organization's core competency or competitive advantage. This is what makes it great. This is what differentiates it and makes it unique. This is why customers come to the organization. Then you have long-term strategic pieces, like strategic goals or directions, or some even call them pillars. I try not to get too caught up in the words, but I want to make sure that an organization has all the necessary components. When I do strategic planning, I'll typically have help an organization set 4 to 6 strategic goals, and each one of those goals then has a set of strategies, usually about 2 to 4 strategies per goal. So the goals might be 3-year goals that provide direction, what the organization wants to do, how it wants to change, and the strategies are generally how they're going to go about these strategic goals. Then you push these goals down to an operational level with more focused annual goals and objectives. You may have some yearly tactics, and finally down to employee goals and plans. While this is a general framework, I do something a little bit different with each one of my clients depending on what they need. So let's go through then the general steps of the planning process. The first step sounds a little crazy, but it is planning to plan. So I sit down with leaders And we identify the steps and the timeline. We identify the stakeholders who will be involved in this process. Strategic planning involves those at the top, but also you should be gathering information and data from all of your stakeholders. So even though it's more of a top-down, there are some bottom-up approaches that you can use. And as you move forward and push this plan through the organization, you get more individuals involved. With any organization and strategic plan, there has to be a clear mission statement or purpose for the organization. And we'll talk a little bit more here about mission statements. They should be clear, concise, compelling, memorable. But I'm more concerned when I'm leading this process that the organization and those members and the leaders understand why they exist and they have a common language for it. And then we worry about a statement. Here you see one from Target. Our mission is to make Target the preferred shopping destination for our guests by delivering outstanding value, continuous innovation, and an exceptional guest experience by consistently fulfilling our expect more, pay less brand promise. And then they go on. For some, this might be a bit of a long mission statement, but hopefully each of the phrases in this statement are meaningful and they reflect who Target is as an organization. Now, some prefer shorter mission statements, like TED, spreading ideas. That's their mission. And I think it's the smallest statement, the shortest statement I've seen. At the same time, the organization should be thinking about and codifying their values. And they can do a values audit. Sometimes this is also called a philosophy of operations. And the values are the beliefs that guide the behavior and the operations of the organization and those who work for the organization. Here's an example from Starbucks, and it's kind of a long values statement. But as you can see, they say to accomplish this mission, Starbucks has principles that guide all of its employees as they go about their daily business. Our coffee, it has always been and always will be about quality. And then they go on to talk about some of their values for partners, customers, stores, the neighborhood, their shareholders. Other organizations will have different types of value statements. They may just list a set of values, or they may list a set of values and then define those. Next, the organization needs to identify its vision or an ideal future state of the organization. Sometimes I find that organizations mix up the two, the mission and the vision statement. So remember, the mission is the purpose and the vision is this future state. Your vision should be imaginable, desirable, feasible, focused, and flexible in case the environment changes. Larger organizations will have a long-term vision, and they may not even define when they would like to accomplish that vision. I also work with organizations to establish a shorter vision, and that really helps us agree on a future state that's a little more attainable, yet still stretches the organization. Here's a vision statement for San Diego Zoo: to become a world leader at connecting people to wildlife and conservation. So you can see they go beyond just having individuals come visit the zoo and interact with the animals, but they truly want to connect people to wildlife and also to conservation. Another vision statement is from Ducks Unlimited: wetlands sufficient to fill the skies with waterfowl today, tomorrow, and forever. So you can see that's a very lofty vision that they've set for themselves. The next step in strategic planning is to conduct a SWOT analysis. A SWOT analysis, and there's more information in your book as well as another video in this week's weekly module. With the SWOT, an organization is first identifying its internal strengths and weaknesses. This is a current state or situational analysis. It also should look externally at opportunities and threats that are out in the environment that are or will impact it or other organizations within its industry or even outside of its industry. And one of the questions that an organization can ask is, well, where is the overlap and the connection between these internal strengths and weaknesses and the external opportunities and threats? And this leads the organization then to a gap analysis. So where do they want to be? What is their vision? Where are they now, their current state, their strengths and weaknesses? And how are they going to bridge this gap? That's where the strategic goals and plans help bridge the gap. So the organization then forms a set of strategic goals or objectives. I usually use the term goals or directions. Some like the term pillars, as I mentioned. And usually we will establish 3-year goals. And usually it's 4 to 6 goals. And the reason I keep it at that is so that it's manageable for the organization and so it provides focus. So some key issues to consider around goals. These goals and objectives should motivate employees and encourage them to strive toward attaining those goals. I already mentioned that goals and objectives, pillars, directions, those are all interchangeable. So the organization just needs to decide which terms it wants to use and how it wants to define those. I save objectives for more specific, verifiable, actionable actions that the organization wants to take at an operational level. And then the organization needs to make sure that it has measures in place to make sure that it's achieving those objectives and goals. And I'll show you more of that in a minute. Most importantly, the organization should create operational plans and implement those plans. This is where the rubber meets the road. There's nothing more important than executing those plans. We don't want to just sit around and have some lofty visionary discussions around what the organization could do. We want to put those into action. And never forget to evaluate the strategies and continue to scan the environment. When I'm doing strategic planning, I make sure that the steering committee for the strategic planning is meeting and monitoring progress at least quarterly, and that they're doing a more extensive progress report on an annual basis. A lot of times we also have committees around goals or objectives, and we're trying to push, as I mentioned before, push this all the way down to employees. So employees should be able to connect their goals with the operational and strategic goals of the organization and its mission. In terms of measuring and tracking success, one approach is the balanced scorecard. It was developed years ago by professors Kaplan and Norton from the Harvard Business School. And they identified performance metrics in 4 areas: finance, customer, processes, and learning and growing. And so their recommendation is that when an organization is doing planning and measuring success, that they make sure that they are measuring in these 4 areas. I use this approach with my clients, but I also make sure that we customize it to fit with what's important to them. So there's going to be a different set of metrics if I'm working with physicians versus if I'm working with a university department. Here would be an example of a scorecard that was used in the School for Professional Studies some years ago. So one of our goals was to create and execute a media plan for promoting graduate programs. And this fit within the larger strategic goal of developing 2 new blended graduate programs, and building the reputation of all graduate programs. The measure then for this media plan was the number of media hits on the graduate programs and relevant faculty. We started with a baseline, so that's your current data, or sometimes I'll have organizations use the average of the last 3 years if they have data. So that's your baseline, and then you set a benchmark. So our benchmark for that year was to get at least 15 media hits. So again, this is the larger goal, was to develop 2 graduate programs, which by the way we did. And then this was one of the objectives within that, and this is how we measured it. You could also use a nice visual like this one, some type of performance dashboard. And here again, you can see the goal and you can see the progress being made on the goal. These types of visuals are a great way to motivate and excite employees. And there's all different versions. You can see some better ones here. And it's just a nice way to keep goals at the forefront and to do it in a way that's visually appealing and also can be fun. So whatever planning process is used and whatever are the components of the organization's strategic plan, it's important that the strategy is aligned with the environment, both the industry environment as well as the larger macro environment, and also then with the other organizational design components that we'll talk about, like structure, culture, the person strategy, reward systems, etc. So next steps, make sure that you read all of this week's readings, watch the additional video lectures on strategy, and then be ready to apply strategic planning in this week's discussion board as well as the assignment. I look forward to interacting with you in the discussions.